Today we're going to talk about classroom management. I've got a little bit of experience in wrangling teenagers and trying to manage behaviours and negotiate emotions and hormones and all of that sort of stuff. So tonight I just want to share with you 4 of my guiding principles that I use in my classroom, and hopefully you can adapt some of those principles to your classroom strategies, classroom management strategies, and I wish you the best of success with it, because classroom management is something that's really hard to just sort of sit down and say, okay, do X, Y, Z, and then you will have this result and everybody will be happy. There are so many variables with classroom management and with human beings which can make it really tricky. So I've got 4 principles of classroom management that I want to share with you tonight. The first one is what I call prevention is better than cure. Now, to my way of thinking, I think teachers and students and parents for that matter want to have a nice smooth sailing experience in their education journey. For me, what I do is I prevent poor behaviours manifesting in my classroom. And there are lots of things that you can do to make sure that you've done everything that you can to prevent these kinds of behaviours. What I do is I think ahead a lot, and I do a lot of visualising and picturing what kinds of scenarios could attract poor behaviour or allow poor behaviour to fester and manifest. So if you are able to, in your normal preparation, to prepare something a little bit extra if you have a difficult class, if you can work hard on your routines and make sure that your students know exactly what is expected, so have really clear expectations, then it's going to make little room for error, little room for them to move with their poor behaviours. And let's face it, with poor behaviours comes poor learning, because not only is the child who is exhibiting poor behaviour not learning when he or she is, out of sorts, the other students around them can't learn to their best because of the poor behaviour. So everybody wins when people are behaving and when you have got the class under control. The other thing that I do is remove any distractions that might cause a student to be tempted to do the wrong thing. So in a high school setting, which is where I work, we have all these sort of draconian rules like, no eating in class, your phone goes in your bag, your hats come off, everything else comes off your desk except for the things that you need. Make sure that the things that you need to do your work are out on the table, and therefore we can focus on what needs to be done for the lesson. I know that the situation in primary schools is slightly different, but you're still able to remove any distractions from learning that might A, prevent the learning, and B, start up a behaviour that's going to be a problem. Another thing, particularly with teenagers and tweenagers, is diffusing situations. And it's almost like you're going in one of those movies as the negotiator sometimes when it comes to teenagers and their hormones, because you find that kids can get wound up really easily, and you find that you have to diffuse and talk them down and calm everything down so that a sensible conversation can be had and a solution can be come to. So really try to diffuse any emotive or potentially disruptive things that could explode in your classroom. And you can do that in lots of ways, by having a really calm demeanour, by having trust, establishing trust. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And just developing ways of connecting and communicating with the students that helps to diffuse those emotions. My last point within prevention is better than cure is practice the golden rule. So many teachers say to me that this kid's giving them so much trouble, but really you've got to also evaluate and assess your own way of interacting with students. So if you want students to speak respectfully to you and to speak in a calm, pleasant, respectful manner, then you've got to exhibit those things, you've got to model those things, and you've got to show the student that you are on their side, that you're there for them. I'm kind of moving into my next point. My second principle that I use for my classroom management strategies is, I'm calling it connect to detect. So if you're not connected with your students, if you're not connected to them, then it's going to be hard for you to sniff out problems before they arise. And we got into teaching because we enjoy being with people, and we like children, and we want to help them, and we want to serve them. So to me, If a teacher is not willing to connect with their students, I think there's something really wrong. And there are lots of things that you can do to connect with your students, depending on the different age groups that you teach, of course. Let me know in the comments what age group you teach. Actually, I'd love to know what demographic our audience is tonight. Some of the ways that I connect with students is that I chat with them when I'm out on playground duty. I just go up to them and start talking about anything random, and it's amazing how they, talk back and open up to you, and they tell you about all sorts of things like fishing and camping and what they watched on TV and which YouTuber they're watching at the moment. I also ask a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions in class, and I try to ask a lot of open-ended questions, not just to do with learning. I mean, yes, to do with learning, of course, but also just, to have a chat. I always meet my students at the door, and I try to also meet them at the door, or greet them at the door when they're leaving, so that it's a nice bookend to the lesson, and so that I often give high fives and stuff when they're coming into my room and leaving my room as well, because it's just that nice little connection, and I always make eye contact when they're coming into my room. That's actually a really good tip, especially for high school when students are moving all around the school all day. I look them right in the eye as they're coming in my door, and I give them a big grin and I say, hello, welcome back, or glad to have you, whatever it is. And when you're looking into their eyes, you can often sort of just tell what their previous lesson has been like, or if they've got some baggage or some concerns or worries, and it's really good to start the lesson that way, because you know where you can go and how far you can push. So yeah, I ask a lot of questions, and open-ended ones like, tell me about XYZ, or what happened next, or things like that. I also give a few little insights into my life, my personal life. They like my students, because I do YouTube, they love giving me tips on what I should do on my YouTube channel, and I talk to them about my kids. A lot of my students know my children because they went to primary school together. I just tell them what I did on the weekend and stuff like that. It makes you more relatable, and when you can connect with students and you're more relatable with students, then you're more likely to be able to, when you come into that diffusing session that you need to sometimes have with teenagers, then you're more likely to have success. I always like to show students that I'm on their side and that I want what's best for them. Students sometimes forget that, especially when they're riled up and really, really angry. So I will say certain things to help them remember that I'm on their side and I want what's best for them. That may not always mean that they get what they want, but when you want what's best for them. But I think it's really important to say that to students, to say, I want you to have success in the classroom, and I want you to know how to behave in society, and I want you to have a successful, happy life. So when you connect with students, you can tell if something is wrong. You can often tell what's wrong, and you can sometimes even figure out what to do just by having a connection with students. On to my third principle that I use for classroom management is get out your tools. Our tools as a teacher are actually really, really sometimes underutilized and really powerful. So the tools that we have that we can use are our voice, our body language, our expressions, our eyes, our face, everything. We're kind of like an actor on the stage, and so when students are looking at us, we can give them messages with everything that we're doing on our little stage that help to convey a certain expectation, I guess you could say. So don't forget about those. And your hands, I often don't even talk when I'm trying to get the kids to behave in a certain way. I won't even talk. I'll just give them the look. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. We all have our look. I've even done this to kids, and this sort of thing, and it seems a bit overly dramatic, but when you're up at the front of your class and trying to direct them into a certain activity or a certain whatever you want them to do, so yeah, hashtag guilty, you need to use whatever tools you've got and use that whole stage for you. Yes, you're an actor. Also, another tool that we have that sounds a bit new agey, but we have our heart, we have our mind, and we need to use those. We're human beings just like they are, and we really need to try to connect with those students and use those tools to get the classroom vibe that we want. The other really important tool that you have, and this seems so obvious, but I'm just going to say it, is your school system. So whatever school system that you're working in, for me, if a student is misbehaving, I have the level system, I have informing parents, I have my head teacher, I have my deputy, I have the counsellor, I have the year advisor, I have so many people, Aboriginal education officer, and that all of those roles and that system is often underutilised by us as teachers. Oftentimes when teachers say to me that they're so frustrated with a certain child and they're doing this and that and it's so terrible, when I start talking to them, I find out they haven't put them on a level, they haven't given them attention, they haven't spoken to their head teacher, they haven't spoken to all of those other support people to try and get a good result for both themselves and the student. So really make sure that you're using all of the tools that you have at your disposal. And we have these systems in place. They're not perfect. Of course they're not perfect, but they're not going to work if you don't use them at all. So the fourth one is to gain an acceptance and an understanding of human nature. So this one might be a little bit controversial, I don't know, but this is one of the principles that guides me in my classroom management. And that is that typically humans won't change their behaviour if it's not in their best interest or if it's not hurting. So for example, let's say you've got little Tyrone who is constantly off task, constantly calling out and disrupting the class, and won't listen to your instructions. You can keep saying to him, Tyrone, be quiet, Tyrone, sit down, Tyrone, listen, Tyrone, do your work, and nothing will change unless Tyrone has to become accountable for his actions. Again, when I talk to less experienced teachers who are so frustrated because they want what's best for Tyrone. By the way, I don't teach anybody called Tyrone, it's just a made up imaginary person. I talk to them and they haven't actually given Tyrone any consequences for his behaviour. They haven't made him accountable for not doing his work. They haven't done, so Tyrone can sail along in his merry little happy land doing whatever he likes. So I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm in my 40s, and when I grew up, when kids did the wrong thing, there was a consequence. So I use that in my classroom. I use the school system of consequences, and I won't compromise on that. I think that in the end, Tyrone, this made-up person, will be grateful that I have made him accountable for not doing his work, and that I have insisted that he behaves in an appropriate manner so that he can get the best learning experience and so that the other students can get the best learning experience that they deserve. Yeah, consequences. So the other side of that, of course, is rewards. Now, for teenagers and then primary students, there's a big difference in the type of rewards that you're going to give. And you guys know what rewards work for your particular students. I personally, in the high school setting, I use a lot of praise and encouragement, and I never give waffly throwaway praise. I always try to focus on the quality that the child exhibited. So, if they were being considerate of somebody else, or if they were doing their best, or if I've seen a marked improvement in their effort, then I will comment on those things and acknowledge them and say, I noticed what you did there and really great job. I'm really pleased with that. So it's really important with that human nature to know that nothing's going to change if there's no consequence, and to really be mindful of acknowledging when kids are doing the right thing and trying really hard. I think that's really important. That's just the way it is. Why would somebody change their behaviour if they didn't have any motivation to do so? Yeah. That's just my 4 guiding principles that I use. So prevention is better than cure, connect to detect, get out your tools and use them, and acknowledge human behaviour, human nature, acknowledge human nature. Congratulations, my fellow colleagues. I think that you do a wonderful job with the youth of our nation, and just think of the amazing and wonderful impact that you are having in your classroom each and every day. You do a fantastic job. You are underpaid and underappreciated, but I just want to tell you that I appreciate you right now, and I shall see you some other time. Bye-bye.